Thank you very much, Dr. Kleiser, for your very kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here. And although I don't exactly know why I was recruited to the team, but look at the organization, look at your programs, and in the past, this certainly is a very, very exciting place to be and to learn and to hear from your thoughts. So Heather told me this is a sort of introduction presentation, and so I take a liberty to talk a little bit about the synergies of a private-public partnership in this space, not particularly on any specific scientific subject matter. So, so this talk will paint a little bit of backdrop and talk a little bit about the current landscape in terms of private-public investment. Take NIFA as an example in terms of the activities and the programs, the models that were used in this area, and towards the end, talk a little bit about some of these ideas, scientific ideas that we see on the horizon, and at the very end, that I hope that after the presentation that we could have an active dialogue, because private-public partnership is not a new topic. And however, we still don't know exactly how the best to take the advantage of the partnership to move the needle. So let's begin. Dr. Sunny Ramaswamy, our former director at the NIFA, and painted the picture of the challenges we're facing for the agriculture and the food systems, like a perfect storm is looming. And many factors contributed to that, and I think the audience are familiar with them. And we look at the population increase, put the demand on the food and nutrition, and then to look at the challenges in the agricultural system, numerous biotic and abiotic stresses impacting the agricultural system. And then to look at the numerous other challenges, things like climate variability, the natural resources, the urbanization, the desire to increase economic status, and then put a new demands on the quality, and then to look at the global trade and political instability, even include the trust, lack of trust on science. And so all these things that happen right in front of us, and then these things fold into the challenge for the future in food and the nutrition for the population. And I think urbanization is something that of particular interest. My wife and I make an effort to visit the family, particularly my mother-in-law, who's in the senior care. We make an effort to go in there every year. She lives in a middle-sized town in Fujian province, southeast coast of China. And we see the gaps between neighboring cities disappear right now in front of our eyes within the last 10 years when we visit them. So the gap of 20 to 50 kilometers now filled with development. So the trend of urbanization, and just saying by the 2050, the distribution of urban population versus rural population will be exact flip to 100 years ago. So most people will live in the urban area. So what is the implication to the future food supply, food system? And so that is a topic worth of some consideration. So turn around to the landscape of funding to support agriculture and the food research and development. Yeah, the screen is much better. To look at this light blue line represent federal R&D in agriculture and food. And over the last few decades, it has been playing a significant role and a steady role over the years. And it is till later 90s and close to the 2000s that you can see that the private investment in an R&D with the government investment is more or less the same. It is only in the most recent decade and the private investment in this area and take a significant tip upwards, and both in the production as well as in the food space. And you can see by the early 2010, each individual sector, production versus the food processing has reached the overall federal investment and even exceeded that. So that suggests a new opportunity to examine the new conditions, and then perhaps it's time to think about new models or revisit the past models that for one reason or another, and it didn't work. So it's time calling for the active thinking. U.S. has been very proud in leading the world in terms of science and technology, but look at the investment trends. And look at the quick increase of the emerging economies, and look at China has surpassed U.S. investment. So really the question of U.S. taking the holding the leadership in science and technology is a serious question. And the distribution of federal and the private investment across the entire agriculture field varies by different segment. For instance, to look at in the food and feed manufacturing, and then the private investment is much greater than the government investment. Is this kind of balance the optimal, or should there be something that worth of further examination? And to look at the human nutrition and the food safety, the federal investment in an R&D, it's predominantly take that particular field. What are the opportunities to have a private sector engage in that kind of research space? What kind of questions that the private sector would be interested to engage and to partner with? So these are some interesting questions that to look at. PCAST, the President's Councils of Advice on Science and Technology, had reported to the President on agricultural preparedness and in the agricultural research enterprise. Multiple references point out the private partnership and in that space. And very clearly, private-public partnership are needed really to take the advantage of the synergy and to move the needle. And the new private-public partnership should be created around the emerging challenge areas that do have some commercial interest, and so the private sector would be interesting to engage. But perhaps in some of these areas will be pre-competitive that cannot be easily monetized in the short term. However, long-term benefit should be identified in that joint effort. Turn around to the NIFA. NIFA is USDA's primary actuarial research agency with a mission investing in advanced agricultural research, education, and extension to solve societal challenges. And many of you are familiar with the land-grant structure and understand that the research, education, and extension are three integral parts of that pursuit, that enterprise, and then carry the task from a discovery through the translation to the innovation to the solution and making societal impact. NIFA has an annual budget is about $1.6 billion, and then distributed among the research, education, extension, and integration. This chart, I want to particularly draw the reference of well, NIFA has 60 or so different budget lines in different categories. One of these is called the capacity funding, things like hedge funds. And this is someone may be familiar with a term called the formula fund, and distributed to the land-grant universities and to enhance the partnership. And then with that federal investment and the state government putting matching fund, and then that allow land-grant universities to choose the identified research priorities, educational priorities, extension priorities, and to do some greater work at the land-grant university. This is one type of a partnership between governments and the universities. USDA carry out multiple competitive grants program. One of those, we call it the flagship competitive grant program, is called the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative. Currently on the market, we have 3 RFAs under this program, and we have sustainable agriculture system, and we have a foundational and applied science program, I have education workforce development. And the distribution of the efforts follow the Farm Bill priorities from production to the food safety, nutrition, health, and the agriculture system technology, including the nanotechnology and other engineering approaches to solve relevant issues. Let me give you one example in a program at a single project level, and then to highlight some private-public partnership. In the AFRI foundational program, we typically support a single PI-led program at a ceiling of $500,000 per project. And with that kind of investment, with the demands in terms of the resources, you get one PI, principal investigator, perhaps with a couple of co-investigators, and then support of a couple of graduate students and postdoctors and some supplies. So you can imagine the contribution of that to the research is incremental in a sense. So we recognize that we need a different model, and in 2010, we launched a so-called Challenger program area, and then we give a larger grants, allow multiple institutes, multiple disciplines to work together, and then to hope that can lead to some transformational, translational work, and like across the valley of death of technology development. I was given responsibility to manage a food technology challenge area. This particular project is look at a microwave-assisted thermal sterilization and a microwave-assisted pasteurization process. The grant went to the Dr. Juming Tan of Washington State University. This has been a very successful project, and built on the prior knowledge, incremental knowledge in terms of microwave technology for the thermal processing. They overcome barriers of engineering design, come up with these different systems. Through the multidiscipline research, they did numerous pathogens and virus relevant under these thermal processing conditions and in the food of interest. They develop a number of products of high quality, near restaurant service quality products. And they imagine that it will serve a larger food service institute, including in the military, schools, senior care, and at a lower cost, and thinking about taking first-class flight and with the interest of affordable price when you're sitting at the economy class, and overcome engineering barriers and really the true innovation on the system design with eyes focused on the energy and the water use efficiency. And they also have unintended or unexpected discovery, which is in the space of salt reduction. And the microwave thermal process can stand for for 50% of a reduction of salt and still maintain the functionality and the sensory property of the food. So this is unexpected. Industry partnership involved the project from get-go. Multiple companies involved in serving as echoing board in terms of technical challenges, technical demands, and the standards. They also make a significant contribution, use their know-how to work with the regulatory agency to obtain the regulatory approval. And the university researchers said that they would never had experience or the knowledge how to go about with that. And the research project indeed helped move the needle in terms of technology readiness level two technologies, sterilization versus pasteurization, reaches a different stage of the TRL, and it reached the point that to secure the industry interest in equipment manufacture and a partnership, well, the license of the technology, and develop a commercial scale of that units. And for the sterilization, the units has been built and being acquired, purchased by the companies in U.S. as well as international for product development, for the testing. And the sterilization, pasteurization is moving into that direction. And then this showing the pathway, and then now we give a second grant to the project that look at Center for Excellence for Food Safety, and really engage a broader industry product development type of a work. And they have one very rewarding experience, also a boot camp, bring the top level of chefs from U.S. as well as internationally, doing the product development with a restaurant meal quality, and then for the perimeter test, and to engage cooperative interest in terms of adapting technology. And then sterilization technology could have a potential impact with the future e-commerce engagement in terms of future food distribution. And you can see the picture depicted that extended the shelf life from 24 hours up to the 7 days, 14 days, or 2 weeks, and then can be distributed like the post office mailbox, refrigerated storage for people to pick up their food, or could be the unmanned vehicle or drone for delivery and on demand. So it helps us address provide a new solution to address food waste, because Pierre told me that the visit a metropolitan area in China, and the short shelf life causes tremendous waste in terms of food loss, because after 24 hours it must to be moved from shelf. Okay, I need to speed up. USDA, NIFA has another mechanism for partnership called the Community Board co-funding. This is mandated by the Farm Bill. After a few years of effort, we've established a protocol and moving forward and calling for proposal, and engage a private sector through the commodity boards. And in 2016, we started funding the project, $2.6 million private-public matching fund. And in 2017, additional boards and additional fund on the projects, and in 2018, and the commitment and agreements in that. The other thing is important to NIFA is that the stakeholder inputs. And last year, we installed a program and formally gathering stakeholder inputs we call the NIFA listening sessions. We had 4 sessions and broadly engaged stakeholders provide inputs in terms of research priority and research directions, and how to address these areas. And the agency is planned to do that again this year in October, November, in the fall time frame. And I really encourage this audience and help us forming our ideas, formulate our strategies moving forward. Let me use the next few minutes to turn around for a few trends that the NIFA recognizes, and I think many of you also recognize in that space. First one is novel foods. And novel foods represent a wider spectrum of direction and opportunities. They are plant-based meats, they are cell-based clean meats, and insect proteins. Even the recent conversation with a dairy board talking about extending international market. However, run into the challenge of traditional dairy products may not be readily accepted at the international market. And so look at the localized needs, and how do we understand the science and technology in the product to make sure there's outlet, the opportunities for U.S. product in terms of. There's also embrace that the foods that are popular or used in other countries, in other regions, but it's not very typically consumed in the U.S. However, there is consumer desire to have the broader experience, both sensory as well as nutritional quality or other values affiliated with these novel foods and inputs. And so there are a lot of food safety and nutrition and quality questions we need to understand. We have, and as you may observe, that the new drives in the space of driving novel food space, and Bill Gates is one of them. Next space, again, recognized by the group is to look at the space and food waste and food loss. And look at the developed country, majority lost at the consumer's home, at food service and distribution. And there are a lot of questions in the space that need to be addressed. The scientific basis and the precision of the information, how does consumer take use of that information accurately, correctly make their decision, and so all remains to be questioned. Some thoughts are already being practiced, turning that unsuitable, less quality food into perfectly suitable food products, as was non-food uses. And also, food automation may also come into the play in the space. Recently, I attended a food automation network conference in Georgia Tech. This is an international conference with heavy emphasis in automation, robotics, imaging technologies, precision processing in meat industry. And the food industry, food service industry mentioned about in order to improve sustainability, minimize food waste, they try to push that responsibility up chain in the supply chain, and hence in the meat cutting process. And they now use the technology to precisely cut the meat in terms of meeting the quality standards. And with the adequate packaging technology, and then so hopefully that when meat come to the food service, there will not be additional treatment and cutting and minimize food loss. And of course, automation has the advantage of minimize food safety and cross-contamination, and more accurate and precise cutting, because each carcass come in a different in the form and the shape, and so and then cutting based on each animal's carcass and the shape and the form to ensure the quality, and that's and very good. In terms of consumer waste, and I'm reminded by National Science Foundation's of 9 big ideas. One of those is to look at a new human-centered technology development. Think about each individual coming in contact with the food 3 times a day, 3 meals a day at least. And if we could empower each individual in the sense of control the quality and then safety, and even food intake, and I think that's in a tremendous space when we think about the development, and then actually each one of us carry a fair amount of technology in our body, and maybe a couple of $1,000. You think about one iPhone and some of these other technology you have with you, and think about the down road further sensor development and the Internet of Things and the decision support mechanisms, and so this is a tremendous space that can make a contribution in the food waste and loss. Talk about data. Big data has been talked a lot, and the NIFA embrace this space, and then calling for research in this space. Data structure, data organization, data standards, analytical tools, and visualizations, decision making, and supporting. And so this is a very interesting and heated area. Biotechnology, no doubt, many space understanding from genotype to the phenotyping, and in terms of producing food with a desirable nutritional value, functionality, so we don't need to spend that. I will be remiss if I don't talk a little bit about nanotechnology. I know ILSI in the past has done a wonderful work to look at the safety of engineered certain nanoparticles. But I want to reemphasize nanoscale science is intermediate length scale. It really depends what are the materials that you are dealing with, and it's a very, very broad, unexplored area. In food processing, one of the examples that we support in Harvard University to look at a nano carrier platform for targeted delivery of natural inspired antimicrobials for food safety using engineered water nano structure. So this is talking about the form of stable the water nano droplets with a rich reactive oxygen species of hydrogen peroxide stabilized by electron, and being small can easily penetrate many small spaces that on the fresh producers or food, and can act on the membrane of pathogens and inactive them. And the additional effort is to carry some common antimicrobials in such droplets, and the effect is quite striking within the matter of a few minutes, and we can achieve a 5 to 6 log reduction. And the PD is well positioned to explore commercialization of the technology. If anyone interested, I'd be happy to link you up with Dr. Marriot of Harvard. The other interesting thing is that observation, this is done by the research in the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and to look at the nanoscale transformation of the food components within human GI system, and then these structure change at a nanoscale, self-disassemble, self-reassemble. Yes, and facilitate nutrient distribution in a different path within the body. And that suggests that in a future food manufacturing, and then the structure is in an area worth of some interesting observation and efforts in that space. And a researcher from China, and then to look at it with the same composition but different the food processing and environmental conditions, and you will result different the nanoparticles, different biological, physiological, and the nutrition and the health effects. I'm running out of short of time. I'd be very happy to chat with you. The differences could exist between violent boiling versus simmering when you're making broth in food processing. So, and then some implication in terms of a desire for certain kind of foods and achieve the health effect. Urbanization is in a trend. The vertical farming, the urban farming, precision agriculture, how do we integrate the food processing into that operation so that minimize the distance and time and the gap between the production to the consumer is an interesting area that we started funding some projects. A word or two about the system approach, and as I mentioned that in the past we found a lot of single p-added approach, and then to make incremental advances in terms of science and technology, how to piece them together and then put the constraints and the advantages at different stage of the problem. And that is in a space we have explored less. But now we think that we've seeded the advantage in that space, and we're calling the research in this place. We have a program currently on the street, and then this is we'll award $10 million for each project, and then take a system approach to address some significant challenges from production efficiency to the minimize the inputs, and all the way to the safety improvement. And it's a multidisciplinary approach, and then we also encourage to bring the social sciences, which in the past was less represented in our space, and into that consideration. So a few words about the takeaway. I think it's quite ample, at least in my view, that there are ample opportunities span from a basic science research to the translational research. And for us, all work together in that space. And a private-public partnership is another area that I think that will give us a greater reward than doing us alone. And I think by working together, hopefully we can achieve a better planet with a more sustainable and healthy and safe and more better quality of life, as outlined by National Academy of Engineering. So I'm reminded by George Bernard that you see things and you say why, but I dream things that never will, and I see why not. And private-public partnership has been talking for a long time. It has a different level of success in different industry sectors. And so in our space, in the food safety, food quality, nutrition, can we think about some new ideas and working together, or can we revisit some models or some experience in the past, perhaps under the new condition, new challenges that think outside of a box and to have a better outcome. And again, life spent making mistakes is not only more honorable but more useful than life spent doing nothing. And we should have a little bit of a tolerance in terms of we may make a mistake, but the overcoming all those mistakes, I think that the future is much more bright, by working on that together than not doing anything. So I want to thank these individuals for sharing their thoughts and the slides and their publications for the basis of this presentation, and be happy to answer any questions if I have any more time.
So that was a nice presentation. I have a question about sort of your purview. So you talked about irradiating foods, and in my mind that was largely a failure some 20 or 30 years ago because of lots of mistaken information. Do you also look at consumer acceptance and how to get better consumer acceptance of some of these technologies?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have a particular personal interest in it because I'm heavily involved in nanotechnology for agriculture and food system. And within that space, in the discussion of what can we learn from previous mistake of other technologies, how do we engage the public in that conversation from get-go? How do we articulate the challenge, understand the true societal needs, rather than having technology and looking for solution? So numerous approach in the space, very different in the workshops, engagement, and we have a program calling for the social science approach, and then I have one slide particularly mentioning. And then that program now is much more augmented. In the past, was embedded in the nanotechnology program because we see their needs. And it's not just the NIFA things, it's across entire federal government in the nanotechnology space. Our AFRI social science program expanded to include all the technology in the space we call the emerging technology, things like novel foods in that space, and then discussion of public's opinion and public's engagement is very important. And so we're actually calling research in that space, have some guidance. And I mentioned one particular in my nanotechnology, a cool technology called eyeball tracking technology to gauge how people assess the information provided in terms of making decisions. So that kind of a technology being included in the social sciences study. And so we're very mindful about the importance of that. And then we hope that we'll have, pave a better pathway moving forward. But we need more help and we need more engagement to do it right. Hi, Ricky.
one more question.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Hongda. Hongda, thanks for not mentioning Canada in the NAFTA trade negotiations around dairy. It's a very sore spot for us in Canada. Hongda, can you talk a little bit about USDA's stance with regards to commercialization as part of the PPP?
Right. That is a very good question that I think in order to give a more comprehensive answer, we'll probably need to find a lawyer. Yeah. So I think that there is a clear tendency over the last few years, as I observed, that the stakeholders, policymakers, want to see the impact of researchers. And so when we invest the federal dollars into the research, what are the visible evidence to show these impacts? And so the moving the needle and translational researches make that commercialized technologies, or at least leading that direction, and break some barriers in the valley of death. I think that is very supported. And so I think I probably stop a little bit short from what you would like to hear, but I think to avoid the trouble, and probably that's as far as I can go. I don't know, I have a colleagues in the audience, whether Dr. Isabel want to add anything to that or not. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Hongda.
Thank you.